Good morning and welcome to the September 5th, 2019 Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting. If any member of the audience wishes to speak to an item on the agenda today, there are speaker request forms to the left of the dais. Please fill out the request with the agenda number of the item you wish to speak to and hand it to the staff along the left wall. At this time, we would also like to ask that if any member of the audience has a cell phone or other electronic device, that you either turn it off or turn the ringer to silent. If you need to take a call, please step out to the hallway so the meeting is not disrupted. The public hearing on item number 1, approval of the August 22nd Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting minutes, is hereby opened. All right, I heard it from Rachel first. Rachel moved to approve the August 22nd Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting minutes. Second. And Mike Kwasny seconded that. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 2.
Morning. Item number 2 is 19 VA 010, a variance request to reduce setbacks and allow increased lot coverage for a garage addition for a property located at 1121 West Boulevard. Here we have an aerial view. It's located in the northwest corner of West Boulevard and Clark Street. There's an existing 2-story single-family dwelling and a detached garage currently located on the property. The applicant's proposing to construct a garage addition and a kitchen addition on the back of the house. Property zone medium density residential district. Minimum lot size for a single family dwelling is 6,500 square feet. That is the size of the lot. Adjacent properties are zoned medium density residential district to the north, east, and west, and low density residential district to the south. Future land use is urban neighborhood. And here we have major street plan showing that West Boulevard is a collector street on the city's major street plan, and Clark Street would be a sub-collector street. Site plan submitted by the applicant showing kitchen addition on the back side. This would go towards the variance for lot coverage from 30% to 33%, but it does not require any variances for setbacks. The garage addition is a proposed 22-foot by 22-foot garage addition on the west side of the existing garage adjacent to the alley, and the applicant is requesting a reduction in the side yard setback on the north side property line from 5 feet to 1 foot. Rear yard setback from the alley on this west side from minimum required rear yard setback for an accessory structure from 5 feet to 1 foot. And then a front yard setback that abuts a street, or side yard that abuts a street, from Clark Street, going from 35 feet to 28 feet for the proposed garage addition. The property is located in the West Boulevard Historic District, and they have been through review and approval. Here we have some elevations which would have been submitted with that historic review. This one would show the kitchen addition, and then this would be the garage addition onto the existing garage. The applicants indicated that the 22 by 22 is because they can't build it matching up with the existing garage, so they would need an additional 1 foot. The existing garage only has a 2-foot setback, and you'll see the impact of that later. But in order for this addition to go in, they need it to be 1 foot larger. Go back to the site plan. Public Works staff has indicated that the proposed garage addition may cause issues with drainage in the alley and along the side lot line. We do have drainage that goes through the alley, and then drainage typically follows along the side lot lines from west to east. So putting in the structure there would may further impede drainage in the area. In addition, having a 1-foot setback from the alley may cause an issue if the city has to do any work in the alley. They can't guarantee that the grading or anything will prevent drainage from running into the proposed garage and causing issues for the applicant. When we get to this north lot line, a 1-foot setback, even with eaves proposed on the garage that would overhang onto the adjacent property or onto the lot line. So one of the stipulations of approval if you're looking at approving this would be that they need to remove the eaves from that north side of the building and construct or coordinate with the building services department as far as what type of materials would be needed for that north side of the building. In addition, so there's the drainage as well, and then just maintenance of the structure and construction of the structure. There's going to be issues with having to get permission from the property owner to the north. In addition, there's a fence located along that property line, so it's a really narrow space in order to be able to maintain it or even construct it in the first place. The applicant has indicated that there are other structures in the West Boulevard district that have similar setback issues. Those are typically legal non-conforming, and should those structures want to expand or they burn down and they want to build back, they would have to come into compliance with today's zoning ordinance, and that would be in compliance with the comprehensive plan. We could start going through some photos. This is looking from West Boulevard, looking into the property, and their driveway, that's the existing garage behind the house. Looking from the intersection of Clark Street and West Boulevard at the property. Looking along West Boulevard to the north and across West Boulevard to the east, and at the intersection of Clark Street and West Boulevard and development in the area, and then looking south along West Boulevard, and this is directly across the street south on Clark Street and looking west along Clark Street. This is the alley. So there are other garages, also the adjacent property to the north and to the west, that have side load garages. This one doesn't have an issue with the setback, but they would back onto private property before entering into the public right-of-way of the alley. The other issue with the proposed garage is that with a 1-foot setback, that structure's right here. This is a pretty tight alley. Being able to back out and be able to see anything is going to be very difficult, so it's a safety issue as well as just being able to turn into it and exit with as much as is in the alley today. So that would be another concern. This is looking at the back side of the existing garage, where the rear yard setback is in compliance. Here's that property to the north, side load garage, setback is being met, and they don't have to back into the right-of-way, which is one of those safety issues. And then looking again in the alley at the space that is available for maneuvering, and like I said, the adjacent property to west also has a side load garage. They wouldn't be backing into the alley. And then, difficult photo to see, but this is the existing fence along the property line, the existing garage. This area would be a 2-foot setback for the existing garage. We're looking at 1 foot closer. In addition, the property owner to the north has a shed right on the property line. So, I mean, with that, You know, the intent of the zoning ordinance is to maintain separation between structures and adjacent properties and rights of way and structures on adjacent properties. For open space, in this case, we would keep open space, maintain drainage, and provide safety. Staff is recommending that the variance request be denied, and the applicants are in the audience if there are any questions for them.
Thank you, Fletcher. I had one question regarding the proposed kitchen addition. Is that push it over the 30% lot coverage, or is it just the proposed garage addition in addition to the kitchen addition?
Combination goes over that 33%. So without the garage addition, just having the kitchen addition, it would still be under 30%.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff on this item? Comments? Mike Kwasny.
I did drive by the location, and that alleyway is pretty tight in there. It's tough to think about putting a way to back out of that garage on there, and I just don't foresee a way for that. And I think you, Fletcher, you did a nice job of presenting that. I would propose that, how would we allow the kitchen addition, and I guess I'll ask staff that, but deny the garage? Is that a possibility?
Mr. Chair?
Vicky.
So if you do deny the variance to reduce the setback for the garage, we can table the variance for the lot coverage because it wouldn't be needed. Before we make a motion on this, Mr. Chair, you may want to hear from the property owner.
Okay. I'd be happy to. We don't have a speaker request for him, but they're certainly welcome to come up to the microphone and yes, if you could just give your name and address for the record.
Hello, I'm Tom Chase, 1121 West Boulevard.
And I'm Dan Palmer, 1121 West Boulevard.
Thank you.
I guess we'd like to address the concerns that were raised by the city because we think we can speak to those and mitigate them. A big one seemed to be the drainage issue. We understand that. What we plan to do is install rain barrels that would collect the water from that new garage. And we have a lot of gardening around our house, a lot of landscaping. So we'd like to direct that water to that landscaped area. We can use all the water we can take off of that roof so we don't have to run our irrigation system as much. So I don't think drainage would really be an issue since we have a way to mitigate that. You spoke about the visibility. I would contend that a lot of the alleys in that neighborhood have visibility issues just because of existing garages and vehicles and other equipment that are parked along the alleys in that whole neighborhood. I do have some pictures that I can show you of what some of those things look like. Where do I put those?
On the document, yeah.
Okay. So here's one. This is on the next block. That camper has been parked there as long as we've lived there, and it's right up against the alley. To me, that sort of represents a huge visibility challenge. That's some sort of structure that is behind someone's house, right along the alley. You can see it's right up against the pole there. Not sure what it is or what its purpose is, but it's interesting. Here's another one. This is at the end of an alley, sort of similar to we're located on our block. You have a couple of vehicles that are, they seem to be permanently parked there. The city staff referenced our neighbor to the west. They do have a garage that's side load, but then if you can see right here, that's a 2-car garage that backs out right into the alley. So this area over here is garage on the other side from what you're looking at that is accessed like really in the back of their house, their backyard. And they are able to back out into their yard or their property and then drive out through, you can't really see it, but it'd be the alley that is across from our house, or behind our house, I should say. So they have a 5-car complex back there. It's 5 cars plus. And as I said, this part of it right here is a 2-car garage, and that backs out directly to the alley. This whole thing is on sort of a corner of the alley. It's an alley that is accessed both from 11th Street, which is over here, and then over here out of the view of the photo is the alley that would access our property. So this is sort of a corner complex in the alley, and I would contend that that's a huge visibility issue, especially with they have a brick wall, which you really can't see that well, a low brick wall, and then on top of that is a fence. And that whole thing is a visibility challenge, I would contend. I did walk around the neighborhood, and not sure when some of these properties were built, but there are garages that are right up against the property line. And several of them do back out onto the alley. So what we're proposing would not be really that unique. Also, an issue that was brought up was the issue of being able to get in and out of that garage given the width of the alley as it exists. And a couple of things on that. We did have an engineered drawing to show that it is possible. I know this is hard to read, but they calculated this if there were 14 feet width in the alley, which there happens to be more than that, it would certainly be possible to get a mid-sized SUV into the garage. So 14 feet at a minimum. We have
18 to 20.
18 to 20. The alley is platted at 20. I'm not sure how accurate that is given some of the structures that people have built along there, especially our neighbor to the west that has that big 5-car garage complex. I'm not sure if that's on the property line or not.
We were just in Denver, and we visited the Stapleton planned development, and we measured there. They have very similar access points off a alley system, and they have a 12-foot alley, and the driveway's back right onto the alley, and those cars, we witnessed them going in and out of 2-car garages, and so we have more than adequate space with the platting of the current alley space. The other thing about where the garage is located, that was intentionally done both from an architectural basis and also for historical purposes. And we worked with the city. We also worked extensively with the Historical Society, and our finishes for that garage are going to be identical to the original structure. So that structure is stucco, and that will be stucco all around that garage, and you know what stucco is, it's very low maintenance. So as far as servicing that north side of that garage, which is in the narrow space between that and the fence, there should be very little maintenance that would be required there. right now, with the current drainage off of the existing garage, and I say garage because that garage has not really been used as a garage. That garage is very narrow in depth, so you cannot get a car in there and shut the door. So that garage is more of a storage area. Our intent is to convert that existing garage into more like a three-season type area where it'd be covered for a patio. The driveway that is between us and the homeowner to the north, that driveway is extremely narrow. It's 10 feet, and you try to drive a vehicle in there and out of there, it's
Well,
very
also,
challenging.
it's right up against the house.
Right up against the house.
I tried to get in there right after we moved in and realized I was going to quickly hit the side of the house, so I decided that wasn't a good idea. And I've looked at the interior measurements of that garage, and there's really no way that you can get vehicles in there. I'm not sure what it was built for, if it was, I don't know.
Well, you can imagine, back in the 30s, the size of the cars were very small, so it possibly was used as a garage. I know that the openings to the garage have been changed. The original openings to that existing garage were on the rear, and there was alley access at one time, and then at some point they switched the access to the other side of the garage. So our intention is for that existing driveway is to eliminate some of that concrete that is over there so we have more absorbable surface. And so that's another part of our on-site water management, trying to decrease the impact of water drainage. When we looked at options, originally that garage was 2 feet wider in both directions. So we've compromised and reduced the size of the garage significantly. The other option proposed by city staff was to move the garage to the south, from right where it is there, move it to the south, have a 5-foot setback from the alley and a 5-foot setback from the front. Because we're a corner lot, we have huge boulevards, and it's a very narrow lot. Even the house is non-conforming. So we're trying to use current day guidelines as far as zoning, which wouldn't even allow reconstruction of the house without a variance, because it's within that 35-foot setback. So I think reasonableness in a historic district is very important, really critical in the thinking about when you approve these things or deny them. I think it's important to consider the architectural impact. This is a historic district, and it's very, very important for us to not take away from that. We want to enhance that. That's a destination for Rapid City, and because of the restrictions that we've placed on homeowners, you drive through there and it is a hodgepodge mess of architecture. They've taken away from the historical nature of those properties in order to conform to these. So I think we've done our due diligence. We've proposed something that is the least amount of impact. It's architecturally pleasing. The State Historical Society embraced it. We're replacing all the windows with historically correct windows. And I think in reasonableness, this property is over $500,000. And for a $500,000 property in any part of Rapid City, the minimum is a 2-car garage. And so in order to have the least amount of impact, not detracting from that house, I think that is the best location. I think it's for safety-wise, that is the best location. As noted, right next to us, there's the fence is on the property line, and right on the other side is a garage, which is covered or is a shed, which is covered surface. So I think our 2-car garage, which has firewall and everything that conforms to today's code, between that and the existing garage, everything will be up to date. It'll have carriage doors on the back side. The other thing for us, since moving there, we have been keyed. Every single vehicle has been keyed. So we've had damage to our vehicles by virtue of having them parked in the street. The road conditions on Clark Street are atrocious. The gutters are completely broken up. We've lost 2 rims on cars. We've lost 2 tires. because of the conditions of that, been reported to the city, and that surfacing is not planned for any type of resurfacing or repair for over 2 years. So that puts the homeowner in a bad situation. It puts us at risk, puts our property at risk. You can see there's a picture of the current situation. That is completely broken off. We've had one person turn their ankle just getting out of there. It's a safety hazard. And so the master plan for properties in the area is to reduce curb cuts, increase absorbable surface on properties, get cars off of the roadways, accessory roads. And I think we achieved that by what we've proposed. I think it's reasonable. If we were to come back and build that garage to the south that is completely detached from any of the other buildings on site, I think that'd be a huge detraction from the historical nature of the property. It'll still be pleasing to the site, but it's going to take up more space, and I think that would be a detriment. We're prepared to do that and come back with that proposal, but I don't think it's in the best interest of the community, of the historical nature of the boulevard area or that property to go in that direction. So I'd like to stay with this plan as we've amended it multiple times.
I'd also like to.
I'm sorry, we have a couple of questions that
Sure.
come up. If you guys could stay up close, there might be some questions for
Sure.
you during this. First, Vicki, is that you up on the planning staff?
I had a few more points. Will I be given more time to make a couple more points?
You bet.
Okay. I don't know that it was
Can I
mentioned.
do these questions first, just to make
Oh,
sure
yeah,
we don't
absolutely.
lose
Go ahead.
them? I'll call you back.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
if you,
Vicki.
do you have planning commissioners that have questions at this point?
Galen has something.
Thank you.
You yield to me. Thank you. Thank you, and thanks to the applicants for your work on getting some really good drawings and explaining your situation here. We appreciate that. The main thing for me, and I think some of the other planning commissioners, that west lot line and being right against the alley. That's just hard for me to swallow personally. And I think, have you thought about, shaving, going 4 feet off so you meet that 5 foot along the west lot line, so you at least have 5 feet coming out of your garage into the alley, and then you'd still have, you're talking about an 18-foot addition in addition to the 20-foot that you can tie into your existing garage, and you'd have adequate depth to park 2-car garage. I think I'd be willing to support everything, except changing that to meet at least the 5-foot setbacks on that west lot line. Is that something you'd consider, or why wouldn't that work?
Well, it wouldn't work because the existing garage is not wide enough to get 2 cars in. So if you added 18 feet onto that and allowed for that 5-foot setback to make I guess what you're proposing is a really deep 2-car garage, you wouldn't be able to fit 2 cars in there. That existing structure is pretty tiny.
You only have 16 interior feet of that. That's a stucco building, so
The walls are extremely thick. That's a well-built structure, but the walls are stucco and they're very thick. So we thought about a lot of these things even before we went to the Historic Commission to get approval for the way that it looks. We considered all these different options, and it seems that the one that we're left with, in order to have a garage that we can use, that's the place to put it. The thing about reasonable use, which was brought up in the city planning's response to our application, it was contended that we have reasonable use right now, and I don't know how that's possible because we don't even have a garage that's usable for vehicles, yet we have neighbors that have 2-car garages, 3-car garages, 5-car garages, and that's not unusual. That's not just our block. So if we currently have reasonable use, I'd like to know what our neighbors have. Do they have extraordinary use? So we just want to be able to get 2 cars off the street, protected, into a garage that we can actually get them into, and once we're in the garage, be able to get out of the vehicles.
Thank you. Mike Kwasny?
Thank you. I think that the house looks great. I like that you're trying to work with a historic society. I think that's a great thing to do. You're trying to establish and keep the historic part of it in place. Now, if you were to do what the city proposed, moving the garage a little bit and rebuilding it, would you still take out the driveway and have grass in there? Is that what you're proposing?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because the access, the current driveway from West Boulevard is that very narrow driveway. We don't use it. I don't feel comfortable trying to use it. So the thought here was, if we have a garage that accesses off the alley, we'd like to take out a lot of that concrete. So that would speak to the drainage issue. We're reducing runoff and putting some absorbed grass or landscaping or whatever that would absorb the runoff, the drainage.
Well, I can see
yes.
that being as a great, it would enhance what you already have there. Your property looks great.
Thank you.
And I like the fact that you're trying to take care of that. I just don't, I struggle with what you're doing with the garage and the 1 foot and the being so close to the alley. That you're right, there might be some things that you can look at a neighbor and you can see some things. But one of the things we try to do is take care of some of that so that it doesn't continue, but we try to enhance, and as we move forward, fix some of the problems that we may have. And that's part of our job as planning commissioners also.
My understanding of that the reason why we made a trip down to the Stapleton area is because that's the gold standard for planned developments in the country. And so when we looked at that, and we looked at how do they access their properties, literally those homes are built 4 feet apart. So they utilize a very small footprint. They maximize occupancy in that area, and they maximize green space. And so when they access those homes, it's through a alley system like we have in the Boulevard area. Those alleys are less than 12 feet. And those properties, they access in and out 2 and 3 car garages off of a 12-foot access point. And so we have 18 to 20 feet there. It's platted for 20 feet. So, and we've had engineers, we've done radius circles down to 14 feet. So I think that is reasonable. I think it speaks to that. We are away from the corner. So as far as visibility, getting into that alley, getting out of that alley, it has 0 impact on that. There's another 60 feet between the edge of the garage and Clark Street. So visibility in that direction is low. Alleys are not thoroughfares. Alleys are access points. And so traffic through an alley is very low traffic flow. Now, if we were going to back out into Clark Street, absolutely, that's another concern, because those are thoroughfares. That's high traffic.
Those are all good points, and I can see where you're coming from. And quite frankly, as we move forward as a city, and you've heard the affordable housing comments, you may see some of what you're talking. At this point in the planning, there is not a set for that. And you may see that it shows up, like I said, in the affordable housing scenario. But at this point, we just don't have it. And so I think I can see what you're talking. I can hear what you're saying. I just don't know that we can. I think the better option is what the city has, the staff has proposed to you, in redoing that and making that. I think you can do a lot with that and have what you really need. That's what I would like to see.
You're speaking to building a garage. Well, I'm sorry, this must have been turned off, but to the, you're talking about building a garage that would be closer to Clark Street?
To the south, they propose so that you get the 5-foot setback, and I think that's a good option for you. It's not that you would have a hardship. You could do it, and it's still something that you could do and have what you're going for. I think you have options, and that's one of the things we have to look at, is that you do have the options. It's not like you don't have options here, and that's what I'm seeing.
Well, if I could respond to that, the city's comprehensive plan specific to this neighborhood, one of the things it speaks to is having the garage be secondary to the facade of the house. And we really have two facades, but the actual front of our house that we consider our front, where our front door is Clark Street. So putting a garage that close to Clark Street would not be consistent with the city's comprehensive plan for garage placement in our neighborhood. The comprehensive plan also speaks to alley access should be encouraged. That's where they'd like to see garages in our neighborhood, especially the West Boulevard Historic District. So while it may be more feasible, it would not be consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and it would not be in keeping with, I don't think, historic standards.
Okay. Well, excuse me, we'll go to Rachel here.
I feel like we've seen a lot of West Boulevard applications lately, and I really struggle with these because it seems like maybe the zoning ordinance isn't always in line with what is more historically accurate for the area. And I don't know what to do about that because I don't think our job up here is to actually like change the ordinance. It's actually just to, see when we can give allowances, and I don't see anywhere we can give an allowance based on the ordinance. There were a lot of non-issues brought up. Like, I don't know why the garage access is going to be a problem. We had a garage like that when I was a teenager that backed up into an alley. And I feel like if I could do it when I was 15, you guys could probably do it now. But again, like I want to try to approve this, but I just don't have like a legal justification to do so. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Vicki, I still have you up there. But...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to do a point of order. Before you speak, you have to be recognized by the chair. So if you hear something and you want to respond to it, please get permission to speak, just so that we keep this meeting going forward. I think there's been some great discussion today. Fletcher's presentation noted that based on the age of this community, there are a lot of existing structures that don't meet the regulations today. That doesn't make it right, but it makes it a reality. If they were to rebuild, they would need to meet those requirements. The point of drainage is a concern in this situation. Even if you're capturing the roofline drainage, the fact that you're only allowing 1 foot for the impervious area that is being created by that footprint of that garage, that impacts the adjacent properties. Even if you're adding green space elsewhere, that creates drainage property issues for that adjacent property. I think that the applicants did a great job bringing forward existing conditions right in this vicinity of this property. At no point should we be compounding that situation. Our engineering staff has looked at this, and from the criteria that we use in ensuring safety in alleys for maintenance and the usage for access, when we reduce these setbacks down more than that 5 feet, especially just to 1 foot, it creates issues. So not only is there a safety concern, but it does go to reasonable use. It's acknowledged that there are homes in this area that exceed what would be allowed if they were to come in for a building permit today. But the obligation before the Zoning Board of Adjustment is to look at the size of the lot, and is it at this point where the property itself is just being overbuilt. There is an opportunity to do an expansion onto the garage that would meet the setback to the rear. It could, if it was downsized to some degree, to have a reasonable sized garage on this property. Potentially the lot coverage variance would go away. Then the side yard setback and the rear yard setback to the north and to the west would also go away. The only variance we wouldn't know about until we saw that layout would be the variance to that south lot line, which is adjacent to the street. We can't design this in this meeting. So if it is the intent of the Zoning Board of Adjustment to grant the variance for the kitchen and to approve the variance for the garage if it were redesigned to meet that north setback and that west setback. I would encourage that we continue it to get a site plan in to see what that setback would then be to, is it Clark Street? Is
Yes.
that the Clark Street? So that we're not trying to figure something out and get it wrong, and then they have to resubmit and make application again for that one. If it's your intent that you just believe that they've got reasonable use and that they could expand the property without variances, then you could deny those for the garage, and then the kitchen itself would not require a variance because they don't exceed the lot coverage.
Thank you, Vicki. That's a great summary.
Point. Mr. Chairman?
Hang on a second. I've got some commissioners up. Karen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Vicki. You said a lot of the things that I had thought about, and we're trying to decide on how to do this. I did drive by and look at the property, and all the properties in West Boulevard area, there's a lot of small lots, big homes, and a lot of real close congestion. But for us to add to that doesn't make sense. That's not what we're here to do. We're here to try to get things in line as best as we can and still have the property owner's use of the land. People have homes without garages, so to say that there's not usable use of the land is not correct, because you still can live there. It's just that you don't have a garage that's suitable. And if there's a way that you can build that garage and still come within some semblance of legal status, even though they might need a variance at that point still, I think that's the right thing to do. And I think continuing this to see if we can see a different site plan so we don't sit here and try to decide which is best way to go. I think that would be the right thing to do. And I applaud the property owners for all their diligence that they've put into this. And that's a lot of work you've put into that, and I commend that. I just think that for me especially, I'm not speaking for the whole committee, the Planning Commission, but for me, it's just hard for me to allow a 1 foot setback either on the side or the rear. It's just really tight, and that area is so tight already. So my thought is that we should continue this, and I don't know if I can make a motion after I said all that stuff, but
You have the floor.
I would make a motion that we continue this for, I don't know, is 2 weeks enough?
Our next meeting would be September 26th. We would need something in by Monday in order to meet that deadline.
So I don't know if that fits with the applicants, but that might be a little tight.
Our following meeting is October 10th.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just ask
Yes.
for clarification. It was stated a more reasonable size to a garage. This garage is only 22 by 22. How many have a garage greater than 20 by 22?
Unfortunately, we are only considering this
Yeah, I
property
know.
at this point.
So, but I want to know, before we invest any more energies into this, what is considered a reasonable size garage? Because it was stated, now we need to know those parameters, because we don't want to waste our time going through another design and bringing it forth, and then to say, well, if you just had a more reasonable size garage. I mean, we need to know that.
I don't think anybody up here can define reasonable for
Well, you're a
across
planning
every
zone,
property.
and I think that that's important for
Reasonable
us.
is defined by each property in and of itself, and
So
that's-
2-car garage, you need to be able to open both doors, you need to be able to shut the door. A 22 by 22 is a reasonable size garage. It was scaled down from a 23 by 24.
Let me interject here. My question to you folks, without deciding the size and all that stuff, I think that's something you can work out with staff to some degree. My question to you is if we continue this, is Monday too soon to work that out? Would that October 10th be a better date, or the first meeting in October?
I would think October, I'm sorry, I think October 10th.
Okay.
You'd rather do that? Okay, whatever that date is, it the 10th, is that the correct? Okay. I'm going to make a motion that we continue this till October 10th and see if we can't come up with a better proposal, that's something that you can work with and we can see if we can't work with better. So that's my motion.
Okay, Karen made the motion to continue to October 10th, and Mike Quasney seconded that motion. We've got a few folks. Vince, would you like to comment on the motion?
Sir, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Palmer and Mr. Chase. Thank you for coming here and explaining this and putting it in the words of someone who has to live with this, someone who deals with this daily. The street outside is abhorrent, and I appreciate you pointing that out. Also, I want to make sure that we understand, yes, we heard you, and reasonable is a great question, but as we pointed out, I don't think we can answer it here. The question that keeps popping into my mind, and Fletcher did a great job of presenting this, by the way, and I got everything. The one thing that because of some of the properties that already have garages that abut the alley, how long ago was that allowed to happen? When did that happen?
Vicki?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in 1968 is when the regulations were adopted that required the 5-foot rear yard setback, and most all of those structures are prior to 1968.
Well, and that's a considerable amount of time between when it was allowed to, and then the city has rethought the planning and zoning. So I'm fully supportive of Karen's motion at this point. I truly see really good ideas, and the one thing that we're stuck with at this point that we're still is that 5-foot to 1 foot. So I'm in favor of the motion as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Vince. Kelly?
Microphone would help. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to echo, I am in agreement with Vicki. The two things that pop out to me, by the way, great presentation. You guys did your homework. The two things that pop out to me are the proximity to the alley. Drainage is a real issue. And the other is the overhang encroaching on your neighbor to the north. You know, if I had a property, I would not appreciate a structure impeding on my property. I'm thinking, again, I agree that kitchen, no problem. The garage, maybe could come up with a compromise for a later date. But if you capture that footprint of your existing, I think you could fall within the historical regs and everything else. You'd lose your sunroom, obviously, but you'd have your garage. I think there is a way to compromise. If you're historically correct, and I'm big on that, I think it wouldn't be the end of the world. You'd get your garage at the end of the day, but I think 1 foot is just too tight, and it's for drainage. Obviously, you can get an SUV in there, but water in this region is a legit issue. So those are my comments for the record.
Thank you. Galen?
Yep, sorry, just real quick to elaborate on what we're asking the applicants to do is, don't think about reasonable size garage. That's very debatable. I think if it's all about the 5 foot on the west lot line, if you can get 5 foot off, give some sort of reconfiguration, whether it's incorporating some of the existing garage into that, making it farther to the south, something like that, you've got a real chance of getting this passed. But I don't think it's going to pass as is with 1 foot. So get 5 foot off that lot line. I think that's what we're asking for.
All right, the motion.
I have one more comment about that. So if you work with the State Historic Society, anytime we touch that existing garage, that's what they have a problem with. So anytime we impact that existing structure, which is considered historic significant, you have to then follow those guidelines to make sure it doesn't dwarf the existing. So by virtue of touching that garage, this is the only design which is feasible with the State Historical Society. If we build a separate structure, it doesn't impact that structure at all, but it does impact the entire property. So now it's going to be an arm wrestling match with the State Historical Society. And so you're going to be in a quandary with your zoning interpretation and then with the State Historical Society, and that puts the homeowner at a disadvantage. And so I think also as a zoning board, you have to think about public safety, and it's the homeowner's right to have safe vehicles and property. And so if that means that by your interpretation of the current zoning and inability to give some leeway on the current ordinances, instead of going back to when those historical setbacks were set when the house was built in that historic district, and I think that really is what should happen, is that we need to redesignate the historic district as those zoning issues that were in place when that was planned. That's neither here nor there for this discussion, but I think that this is going to keep coming back to you. You're going to keep getting all these issues with people who live within the historic area. And by virtue of building another structure, it's going to architecturally impact the district. And that's why we've avoided that. We'll do it, but I'm going to tell you, then you'll be responsible for future generations going, why did they do that? Because that really was a bad choice for a historic district. And so I'm just going to tell you that. I think it's reasonableness has to be on both sides. And we're willing to do it, but I'm going to tell you, I think I'm a lifelong resident of Rapid City. My family grew up in the McGillicuddy house. We're all about preserving historical nature of this community.
If I could.
We're not talking about the west side of Rapid City where you have huge lots.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Our hands are tied to a certain extent by our zoning ordinances. If you feel they should be changed for the West Boulevard or for the city, you've got to bring that to the council. Make a presentation to the council. We have to concentrate on this property.
Well, and I do
with the
understand that,
ordinance
but
we
you also have a little bit of leeway about how you interpret
I
things.
know. We have a motion on the floor, though, and I think we'll hear this again. Any other comments from the commission on the motion? Vicki?
Yes, I just wanted to let the Planning Commission know that we will contact the property owners and try to set up a meeting next week, and we will have our historic preservation planner join us, and then we'll be bringing forward something that we know addresses all those issues as well.
Okay. All right, so the motion on the floor is to continue till October 10th. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay.
Item number 3.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. So it is my understanding that the applicant has requested that this item be continued to the October 10th Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting. My apologies. That would be our recommendation.
All right, Karen made the motion to continue item 3 to October 10th, and Rachel seconded that motion. I do have a speaker request form from Talbot Wyzoric. If it pertains to the item, you might want to wait until the 10th to present, just so it comes with when we would make any action on it. But I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment. Talbot Wyzoric with Gunderson Palmer. I'm here for TNS, which also received the notice letter. It's the landowner. The supplemental information, I'll be here on the 10th, I suppose, but I want the board to know when they're voting on this that the party that's requested the appeal, who owns the signs, we have informed them way back in January the signs were out of compliance. We've informed them numerous times the signs are out of compliance and asked them to remove them. You'll see that we have not appealed because we agree with the staff's position that signs should both be removed because they've been out of compliance for so long, and he's not non-responsive to complaints about the compliance issues from us or the city. So I apologize. Last I heard is it wasn't the staff's position wasn't necessarily that it should be continued. So, but I did get to learn a lot about West Boulevard today. So.
Thank you. All right. Motion to continue on October 10th. Everybody in favor? Oh, Vince, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not in favor of continuing this because I believe that the owner of the signs have been given plenty of time to get this fixed. I think the homeowner has a right to get this done and get this done now in a timely manner. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
All right. Motion carries with no from Vince. Look for a motion then to adjourn the zoning board of adjustment. Rachel made that motion.
Second.
And Karen seconded the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We'll now commence the Rapid City Planning Commission meeting for September 5th, 2019. Again, if anybody wishes to speak to an item on the agenda, please fill out a speaker request form. They're over by the left wall at the table. And if you still have your cell phone on without having it turned to silent, please do so now. Consent calendar. Items 1 through 5 have been placed on the consent calendar and may be approved as a group. Action will be taken on all consent items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent calendar by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration at this time. The findings of this planning commission are recommendations to the city council. The city council will make the final decision. Are there any items 1 through 5 that the staff would like to remove? No, thank you. All right. Any items 1 through 5 that any planning commissioner would like removed? And are there any items 1 through 5 that any audience member would like removed? All right. The chair would then entertain a motion to approve items 1 through 5 in accordance with staff recommendations. All right. Mike Gallagher made that motion, and Rachel seconded it. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 6.
Good morning. Patsy Horton, Long Range Planning. This is an application, actually a resolution to dissolve tax increment district number 67. It was approved in 2008 and effectively created in 2009. This is called the Brookfield subdivision. It's located just adjacent to Haynes Avenue, Country Road, generally in that area. The county line is at the very top of the picture. The first picture on the left is from 2008. The 2018 photo shows all of the extra development within the district. This is one of the pictures that of the infrastructure that was created with this district. This is a culvert at Cobalt Drive looking southeast. This is from Cobalt Drive looking west along the subdivision. Milano Street looking south. Cobalt Drive looking east. And then I have some information about our the reallocation that you saw a couple months ago to adjust the cost more closely with what was expended. The bottom line is just under $4 million. Not sure why that doesn't show. Here is the boundary that was created. These are the improvements that were proposed. There's a water main on and some oversizing on the west side of Haynes. Those improvements were not completed, but all of those on the east side, the culvert for Cobalt that we just saw, the water main oversizing for the sewer, and then another culvert crossing at Three Rivers. The first culvert was just over $329,000. The second culvert was $135,000. The oversizing for the water main was $143,000, and then just under $13,000 for the sewer oversizing. So the total capital costs within this TID that were expended were $621,000. And then, you know, we've got some certified costs here for you, but based on the number that is just off of the screen there is they spent approximately 35% of the allowable costs. Most of the savings were in the financing costs, down on the very bottom here. And there's the capital cost. And then 3, I'm not sure why this didn't show up, but my apologies. I'll work on that for the next time. So one of the things that we look at with the tax increment district is when it's created, there's a base valuation established. That base valuation was just over $3 million. To date, those were the anticipated project costs, the $3.9 million. Whoops, sorry. The equalized base value was $18.8 million. Today's value at the end of 2018 is $46.8 million. So there was an increment generated of $28 million within this TIF. So that's about a $2.8 million average increase in property valuation, which is great for our community. And at the end of this district, we are returning not quite $1.3 million back to the taxing agencies. So with that, I just wanted to give you a little history on how this TIF operated. It was a very excellent TIF, in my opinion. We covered oversizing costs, we covered drainage facilities, and really nothing else. But with that, we do make a recommendation to approve the resolution to dissolve. Do you have any questions?
Thanks, Patsy. I don't think anybody has any questions. All right. All right, Rachel made the motion to dissolve tax increment district number 67, and Karen seconded that motion. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 7 is an initial plan development to allow for an apartment complex to be known as the Tallgrass Apartments. This property is located at the current terminus of East Anamosa Street, south of Menards. The future East Philadelphia Street will also be constructed along the south lot line of this property. The project will include 10 buildings, 607 apartment units in total. And as a part of this application, and the reason they brought this in as an initial instead of an initial and final, is to request an exception to the height. This is zone medium density residential, and a maximum height of 3 stories or 35 feet is allowed. They would like to do 4 stories with 56 feet. So with that, we'll start the presentation and I'll show you some slides. An aerial of the property, and that is Menards to the north. It is currently vacant. It's about a 25-acre parcel. You can see the terminus of East Minnesota or Anamosa Street along that southwest lot line. The property is primarily zoned medium-density residential. At City Council on Tuesday night, they did take action to rezone that slight sliver in the southeast corner from low-density to medium-density residential. So once that becomes effective, the zoning will be in place for this development to go forward. The future land use plan identifies this use as mixed-use commercial. Higher density residential is a secondary use. This shows that East Anamosa Street is a principal arterial street, and East Philadelphia Street along that south lot line is a collector street. Both of those streets, upon construction, will be designed to accommodate traffic from the proposed development. The layout of the 10 buildings will be in 3 phases. I'm not sure what Patsy did with the pencil to write with. Well, we'll just speak to the item. The 3 phases will include the the three buildings in the very eastern portion is Phase 1, Phase 2 is in the middle, and Phase 3 is on the west side or left-hand side of the screen. As a part of this, there is a significant amount of open space that's being identified. They are actually exceeding the required amount of open space by 23,000 points. And this does show the phasing. As I noted earlier, the traffic to be generated off of 607 apartment units is significant. Recently, the city had approved an East Rapid City corridor study that included this property. And even though it didn't anticipate this density on the site, the applicant has met with public works staff. And in lieu of doing a traffic impact study, they are going to be providing center turn lanes in East Philadelphia Street and East Anamosa Street to assist with the turning movements needed to enter and exit the site, and as such, an exception to waive the requirement to provide a traffic impact study has been approved. This is looking at the height of the buildings. The applicant has noted that the actual final design has not been locked down, but the intent of this is to show you that these will include 4 stories. They'll be earth tone in color. They will have stone accents. They'll have the peaked roof. And we'll work with them as the final comes in to see what that final design looks like. You may have remembered that we had a similar request by this same apartment developer along Mount Rushmore Road near Fox Drive. And at that time, Fox Run Drive, and at that time, there was concern about the extended height of the apartments being directly adjacent to an entrance corridor. It's important to note that in this case, the development does set back about 1,400 feet from East North Street, similar to what we've seen the Planning Commission do in the past when they've granted 4 stories. They are also proposing to lower the grade by 10 to 20 feet to minimize the impact of those apartments. It's very important to note that this is a part of the Shepherd Hills subdivision, and you have seen a master plan for that at previous Planning Commission meetings that did show that this property owner owns the property to the east, to the west, and to the south. Menards and other industrial uses are to the north. Thank you, Pats. That does allow for 4-story structures. And so this is going to blend in better with the landscaping that's existing. They did provide us photo simulations that look at the site, and if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you can see where it's taken from East North Street, and that this is Menards at that location. So looking at the signage for Menards, we've got a horizon line that is going to be fairly consistent. And then again, looking into the site from the other side of Menards, and with the lowering of the grade and the existing terrain, they will have the impact of being 3, maybe 3.5 stories. I went out to the site yesterday and took some pictures. This shows that they do have the signage posted. You can kind of see the elevation differential as you enter the site. This is the terminus of East Anamosa Street currently. Looking into the site, and look at those views. There's going to be some fantastic views from this apartment complex. When we considered the use of this property, it does seem to be the appropriate location for apartments. There is Western Dakota Tech to the south. There are numerous employment opportunities within this corridor along East North Street. So providing diversified housing as a part of Shepherd Hills is exactly what our comprehensive plan is charging us with doing. When we looked at the specific layout of all of the community area with an outdoor swimming pool, walking paths, gazebos, dog park, raised garden plots, it was impressive to see the amenities that will be brought to this project for those residents to appreciate. And looking at the location of the site in respect to East North Street and noting the 1,400-foot separation, in lieu of what we were charged with looking at when it was directly adjacent to Mount Rushmore Road, this certainly is in line with what we've seen the Planning Commission do in the past. We are recommending that this request be approved with the stipulations noted in the project report, and we are recommending that the height exception be granted with the stipulation that when they bring in the final design of the structures, that they continue with the proposal to be earth tone, that they keep in character with some of the Black Hill amenities. We are anxious to see some of those stone features, that peaked roof line, and so we'll work with the developer at that stage as a part of the final. So overall, this is in line with our comprehensive plan. It will meet a housing need in this area, and we are recommending to approve.
Thanks, Vicki. Great presentation. Mike Kwasny?
Vicki, that was very good. Thank you. And I applaud the developer for looking at the areas that we have in the city to develop. I know at one point on the Rushmore Road development, it was brought to the attention that we may lose some developers, but I think the developers, there's enough area to develop, and I applaud what he's trying to do here. I think that's a great use of the land, moving it back. The 4 stories, I'm assuming, will help in the affordable housing that we keep trying to work towards. I hope that's the thought process, and that it does help with that. I do think that we have to look at the traffic flow. I'm not sure that we have any plan to get that traffic to go to Elkville yet, or that we have any plan where multiple access, especially with what we have there. I heard Philadelphia mentioned, but as many pieces that we're putting in place here, I think we have to have even more access off there so we allow people different options to leave the area. We're moving people into a what is actually a pretty busy corridor with a lot of businesses and stuff there. So I think as we go forward, we have to address and keep that in mind, having access in more places. So I hope we do that.
Karen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Vicki. I approved this initial plan development because I think this is the correct way to develop this whole area. You've got that whole mix of properties that are going to be low income and high income and single family and multifamily, and it's going to make a huge difference. That whole complex is going to make a huge difference in that area, and there's a lot of streets that will have a huge impact. I agree with Mike in the transportation area, but that'll come, I think, as things are developed. But I'm glad that they're looking at a 4-story in this area. It's much more appropriate than the one that we looked at Mount Rushmore Road, which is right adjacent to that roadway. But this is set back, and the fact that they're going to lower the ground and it's so far set back from those major roads, I think is appropriate. So thank you.
Rachel?
Yeah, I also want to kind of echo seeing so much livability put into a space. It's really fantastic, and I'm excited to see that. This is kind of neither here nor there, but it's more of a question for staff. Do we know where the nearest bus stop or anything like that is for access to transportation for residents? And this isn't something that the applicants have any control over, obviously, but just a question.
Mr. Chair?
Vicki?
I can't answer that question without visiting with transportation staff. But now that you've mentioned it, we will be having that discussion. And certainly, similar to what we have done at other apartment complexes, and I'll just note Eagle Ridge, we do, when the need arises, try to incorporate and work with the transient department to ensure that we have that bus alignment and route considered. I don't know that this would be needed at this location, but we will be having that discussion
Okay, I appreciate that. I recently visited someone who's, she's an expert in geriatric living, and it was really an illuminating sort of conversation about, having all the pieces together. You have ADA accessibility, you have elevators, you have so many great things for this apartment complex, but at the same time, if people can't get back and forth, like they can't really live there. So it's just something I'm trying to, at least pay attention to now. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Vicky.
I'd like to correct myself. I meant transit and not transient. And if I don't correct myself, Fletcher will tease me later. So I'd like to make that correction right now. Thank you.
We were all trying to be polite. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see in the stipulations, now, even though the property owner has volunteered to reduce the grade 10 feet, whatever, it's not actually part of the stipulation, so I'm wondering if that needs to actually be a part of the motion that goes forward for approval of this, because that is one of the selling points for having 4 stories, is actually having 10 feet knocked off the grade, but it's not mentioned in the stipulations.
Mr. Chair? So certainly we can add that. Since this is initial, we'll have an opportunity to find out what that actual dimension is with final. So we're leaving some room for flexibility. But if we would like to at least acknowledge that that's a part of why we considered it, if we change stipulation number 1 to read, an exception is hereby granted to allow a 4-story, 56-foot high apartment development in lieu of, with the stipulation, and then we speak to the final design, and that the grade be lowered as proposed as a part of the final plan development application. So we know it's going to be at least 10 feet. We'll see what areas are 20, but it acknowledges that we only granted it in consideration of looking at what that actual number would be as a part of the final. Would that meet with your approval?
That'd be great.
Mr. Chair, I would make that recommendation that we change that stipulation accordingly.
Is the applicant in the audience? Okay. I'm not sure is Eric a voting member today? Okay. So we need that to be part of a motion from a voting member.
So I will recommend that if the Planning Commission chooses to approve the initial plan development, it be so with the stipulations as noted in the staff report and with the revision that I identified as a part of my presentation.
Okay. Is there someone that would like to make that motion? I'll make that motion. All right.
I would second that.
Rachel made the motion to approve with stipulations as Vicky presented, with the addition to stipulation number 1. And Mike Kwasny seconded that motion. Todd, you had a light up.
Yeah, I did. I was just going to mention that they do have a grading permit approved already to do that lowering, so they've already begun work on that.
All right. Any further discussion, Mike?
I just wanted to note that Fletcher's still going to give you a hard time, even though you fixed that, okay?
Got that right.
All right. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 8.
Mr. Chair, can we take item 8 and 9 concurrently?
Please.
Okay. Those items are 19 PD 038 and an associated rezoning 19 RZ 033 to rezone from office commercial a piece of property from office commercial district to general commercial district, and a final plan development to allow a car wash. Property is located east of the intersection of 5th Street and Parkview Drive. It's currently void of any structural development. With this aerial, you can see 5th Street is it's a commercial corridor. Over here we have the Walmart. We have some office buildings, and these areas, banks. Further south, we have some fast food restaurants and a gas station closer to Catron Boulevard to the south. And to the north on Parkview, we have a residential neighborhood and then apartments east along Shelby Avenue. Here we have the current zoning of the property. I believe back in 2006, property was originally zoned low-density residential district. It was rezoned to office commercial district with a plan development designation requiring that a final plan development be approved before building permits issued. The applicant is now proposing to rezone from office commercial district to general commercial district because a car wash is not identified as a permitted use in the office commercial district, but it is identified as a permitted use in the general commercial district. You'll notice this property on the north side or of the intersection of 5th Street and Parkview Drive. That was originally low-density residential district and was in the past couple of years rezoned to general commercial district to allow a bank with a drive-through coffee shop. The reason for the rezoning the general commercial district was because the drive-through coffee shop, the retail component, is not a permitted use in, say, the office commercial district. The rezoning was approved in conjunction with a final plan development, which identified what the structure would look like, where the signage goes, the type of screening from the adjacent properties to the north, and the design of the site, how the equipment was going to be screened from those adjacent residential neighbors. So again, the applicants, when we look at the rezoning, it is consistent with what we've done in the area. It's north of a activity center located along a collector street, which is Parkview Drive, and a principal arterial street, which is 5th Street, and then principal arterial street being Catron Boulevard as well. If we go back to the future land use plan, you'll notice when this one to the north was rezoned, it was identified as low density neighborhood. It should be moved to employment center, which is what on the north side a lot of these properties are. But the general commercial district is not identified as a recommended use in the employment center district. You do have up on the dais a couple of letters from adjacent property owners identifying some concerns with the proposed development. Those were brought in recently. Here we have site plan identifying the property. We have drive-through car wash. Structure is located here with the entrance on the north side. So access would be from Parkview Drive on that north side of the property. This approach on 5th Street would be a right in, right out only. Sorry, not right in. It would just be a right out only. And so part of the design when it comes in, if it is approved and comes in for a building permit, would be redesigning that approach to not allow people to think that it's a way for them to turn into, because it will just be an exit. As well as there are some vacuum stalls located adjacent to the intersection of 5th Street and Parkview Drive, with this enclosure being the power for that. So staff has identified some potential issues, and we've met with the applicant, and they've attempted to address some of those issues. One of them being traffic coming in. There are proposed to be 3 pay stalls with stacking. So that would be what the applicant is proposing to do to address some of the traffic at busier times, is that they have a lot of stacking available to get people onto the property and not potentially backing into Parkview Drive. The applicants indicated that with state-of-the-art technology, they have unscented soaps, enclosed dryer and washing through the conveyor for the car wash, as well as an enclosure in this corner for the vacuum stalls. But when we look at it, the concern is the residential neighborhood, which is located north. It's at a higher elevation. It limits the ability for the applicant to be able to provide a buffer or screening with either landscaping or fencing. But that is something we would like the Planning Commission to consider when looking at this. Here we have some elevations of what the proposed car wash will look like. I believe there's an existing one on Haynes Avenue that we reviewed before. Elevations from the applicant, I believe this is looking at the intersection of Fifth Street and Parkview into the site. And you can see the vacuum stalls here and the building. Again, I mean, that shows mature trees. They're not going to be mature trees when they go in. And then another reason this is on non-consent is because the applicant is proposing an electronic reader board sign, which is a permitted use in the office commercial district or the general commercial district. They have two different options. The Planning Commission has asked staff to bring forward any plan developments or conditional use permits with electronic reader board signs before you on non-consent so that you can determine whether they're appropriate. And so we have two options. One's a pole sign and one is a ground sign, ground mounted. So I'm sure you'll want to make a determination on which you feel is more appropriate or whether you have an issue with either one. But either one would be permitted in the general commercial district if this were approved. One of the concerns from one of those letters is, or both the letters, is the signage that's proposed and the landscaping blocking some of the proposed and existing signage for adjacent properties. In addition, one of the neighbors noted that they felt that this area was being developed with more office uses and this doesn't really fit in a car wash. But that, you know, if the Planning Commission determines that this is the appropriate location for this type of use, then we would recommend approval with the stipulations noted in the staff report and approval of the associated rezoning request. And if you deem it is not appropriate, then we'd recommend denial of both. Here we have an aerial provided by the applicant showing increased setbacks along the streets to the paved area. But again, that landscaping, when will it be mature enough to provide a buffer? And these are the dwellings which sit at a higher elevation. This is looking into the site south from Parkview Drive back towards the intersection with 5th Street and Catron Boulevard and towards the intersection with Parkview Drive and 5th Street, and then Walmart and the accessory building being located over there. So this is in a way appropriate because of the location adjacent to a community activity center. This is looking at, again, where the Walmart would be located and the bank on the adjacent property on the north side of the intersection, which also has an electronic reader board sign, which was approved through a major amendment to their plan development. And again, that structure that was built, and then the screening that they provided along that north lot line where those dwellings are located. This is looking along Parkview Drive towards the north and east, back towards the east where those apartments are on Shelby Avenue. So, I mean, the applicant has indicated with state-of-the-art technology, the orientation of the building, setbacks, lighting, and stacking lanes should mitigate negative impacts. However, staff is also noting that the higher elevation of the residential district, which is existing to the north, there's not a lot that can be done with buffering or screening to provide a buffer from the proposed use, potential impact of noise, traffic, odor potentially, which will have more of an impact during warmer summer months, and their proposed hours of operation being from 7 or 8 a.m. until 1 hour after closing means during the summer they could potentially be open until 10 p.m. when people are using their backyards, and the potential impact that could have. So we're leaving this up to you for a decision. We know that the applicant has a presentation to make. Are there any questions for staff at this time?
Mike?
The signage that's there, how does that compare, that they're proposing, how does that compare to what we've already approved there? Do you know?
It's in compliance with the sign code. I'm not quite sure what the size of the one that we previously approved was, but this one's located on the south side of the property, so it should have a minimal impact on the residential. It'll be located in this south corner, furthest away from the residential and more geared towards getting that traffic along 5th Street.
Now, the option 2 would probably be the better option of the 2 signs as I saw it, because it was more of a lower. Option 2 looks to be more, it would help out in that as well if we had to go with that as a stipulation. I think that's more of a monumental type sign, looks to me, and I think that would solve some of those problems as far as that signage. We're not proposing any fencing behind there as far as, maybe I missed that?
Fencing is required along the property line on the east where it abuts a residential district, which would be the medium-density residential district.
Okay, that's what I missed that somewhere, so, okay.
Mr.
Thank you.
Chair?
Yeah, Vicki?
To answer Mike's question about the signage, so as a part of the bank with the coffee shop that went directly across the street, they did seek a request for an LED sign as well. And similarly, when the Planning Commission approved that request, it was with the condition that it be removed or relocated as far away from the residential development as possible. I think in looking at the concerns expressed by the 2 dental offices directly south of this, the ground sign might actually block their signage, whereas the pole sign might allow that better visibility. So if we look at their concerns, they may prefer the pole sign. The important feature is that neither one should be visible from the residential development to the east.
Mr. Commissioner, I think that the residential is what should be considered. I don't know that we should necessarily say whether or not we block, because as we go to monumental signs, I can see that happening in our community. That's going to be a condition that's always going to be there, where if everybody has monumental, that's going to, until you get closer to that building. And quite frankly, cell phones are going to take care of that because everybody uses that to find places anyhow, so.
Vince?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand that across the street, there's already a line of vacuums that take place in that is in that gas station across the street, and that's continuous because they're open 24/7, right? Am I correct?
Mr. Chair?
Vicki?
That is significantly further south, adjacent to Catron Boulevard, and there are no residential developments directly adjacent to that one. That's actually south of Stumer Road, a significant distance.
All right. And so they do have some natural landscaping that they intend to put up as a barrier for those vacuums. And there is a time limit as to when they're open and closing, which is not after 10 o'clock and not before. What was that time again? I'm sorry, Pleasure.
It would be between 7 and 8 a.m. opening, and then they've stated that they intend to close 1 hour after the sun goes down. So that'll be, potentially 6 o'clock during the winter and 10 o'clock during the summer.
And like Mike, I'm in favor of option B on that sign. But again, I think there's other requests to speak, so I'm withholding.
Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If anybody has been anywhere near some of the car wash places, you know that those vacuums are very high-pitched and extremely loud. You have 3 or 4 of them going at once, and that's extremely loud. And it would make it very difficult for these people to, in the residential area, to not ignore that. And a simple fence wouldn't block out a lot of that sound. And I think for that reason, plus a couple of other concerns by neighbors in the area, I would be, if I were a voting member, I would be disinclined to approve that. Thank you.
Galen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to go over the comments from the adjacent dental offices and kind of some of their concerns. Maybe I missed this. What's the difference between a sign in office commercial versus a sign in general commercial? Is office commercial more restrictive, I imagine, or are they the same? You can put up the same kind of sign in either?
Mr. Chair,
Vicki?
the signage would be allowed the same in both because they're both commercial designations.
So basically, by doing the rezone from office commercial to general commercial, it's not like we're saying they can put up a bigger sign. So that was kind of one of their concerns, is they bought the property, they developed their dental offices there because they assumed it would be office commercial all around there. But if the signage can be the same either way, that's, somewhat a moot point. But I think it is, they do have a good point. If we don't want to be putting 2 signs next to each other, I almost see I don't know if we're here to tell them where to put the sign at, but I'd almost say it's a better spot to put it on the corner of Parkview and 5th as a monument sign, just to get away from the other sign. But I haven't looked at the site to really do a big analysis on that. But that's just my concern, is making sure that we're being good neighbors to the dental offices next door.
Karen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Years ago, when this whole area started to develop and Walmart came in and then the dental offices came in, the idea was that, in my opinion, was that we were going to try to keep this as best as we can to an office commercial setting down there, considering that the hospital was close by and that medical things were up on Cat Run and I mean on Highway 16 and all those things that have changed since then. And to me, putting the general commercial for the bank was appropriate because it was just for that drive-through
Coffee.
Thank you, coffee shop. But the bank itself was more of an office setting. And I always thought that side of Fifth Street would sort of remain office and residential in nature. They've got the apartments back there. There's a lot of land out there that can be developed south of that church that's there. And so, excuse me, having something that's kind of a buffer between Walmart and residential, we thought was appropriate for office commercial. I'm not saying that this corner couldn't be general commercial. I'm not saying that, but I think to put a car wash there, to me, I know it's a general commercial item, but to me it feels industrial. It's got all that equipment outside. It's got cars coming and going and loud noises from the car wash itself and from the vacuum cleaners. And you've got lights on from the signs, and the people who are residential area north of there has to look down on that. I know we really considered the bank and the signs that were going to go in there and how that would impact those folks too. And I don't think it's appropriate to put a car wash in that corner, so I can't support that, and that's kind of my comment.
All right, we do have 2 speaker request forms on this from Cale McNabo and John Parker. If you guys are welcome at the podium, you decide who goes first.
Good morning. Say, my name is Cale McNamara. I own Long Branch Civil Engineering. I'm the design engineer on the project, and thanks for the opportunity to come today and to discuss some of what we're seeing here. And I would also like to address a little bit of history on the site, as well as some of the valid concerns that were raised by the orthodontist, particularly with regards to the sign and the landscaping. Let's see here. How do I get it on the dinosaur? All right. Firstly, I know you've all driven by there. What we see is a triangular shaped lot, and it's ended up this way because it's a remnant. You know, it's when Fifth and Parkview came through, it's just sort of what was left. And what's happened here is, and it's sat on the market in this condition because it's not very useful in a conventional office commercial setting because of the configuration of it. Access needs to come from here to line up with the access that's currently for the bank in this location. So when you start carving out a office commercial style building, it makes this traffic circulation an issue. And I think that's why you've seen it sit there for as long as it has. It's just an irregularly shaped parcel. And that's why we took a look at it. We thought, well, gosh, what's the highest and best use would be something where you could circulate in, come through, and exit onto 5th Street. And a right turning movement, of course, there's medians down the middle of 5th, so there's no opportunity for that turning movement, which you wouldn't want to make anyway. The other issue that's come up, and I know that there's been some discussion, and maybe, hey, Fletcher, can I get this thing up on I could get that one up. It's a little blurred out here, but I would like to point out for you that when we're looking at the residential, we gotta zoom out a little bit. Right there. The residential you're discussing is right there. That's the nearest residential house. Oh. I want to bring this back over. Nearest residential house is right here. This is the entrance to the tunnel. That is 340 feet. So there's quite a bit of distance. Entrance to the tunnel, the loudest part of the tunnel actually would be this location. So 340 feet, nearest house entrance to the tunnel. Granted, it sets significantly higher, and it sets just above the bank, which is in that location. What else is of interest is the existing dentist sign, which sits right here. Our sign that I drew on this plan is located in that position. And that's a little bit of an error on my part. I just took a look at the minimum setbacks, dropped that sign in, didn't give a lot of thought to it. When the dentist's office pointed it out, obviously that was an issue that I should have addressed originally because their site window looks more like that to a ground monument sign. If you're driving here, you can't really read the sign until you get into say a 20 to 25 degree corridor right there. Then you can read the monument sign. So what I would propose, and John, the owner, is completely amicable to, is we could take our sign, slide it back to get it out of that visual corridor. So we're not obstructing the orthodontist sign. We're not talking about sliding it back even that far, but there's kind of a limiting cone of visibility you have to the orthopedic or to the dental office signs. So we're not obstructing it. We're not trying to wash it out. The other concern that was raised is when you look at our landscaping plan, which Stanley Design Group did, the landscape architect, I believe, had some more plantings that were in this area. And there was some fear that we would block visibility to their facility using that. We can modify that landscaping plan to stop any of the like the plantings, the larger tree style plantings, we can put them in this corridor and stop them short of the property line for the dental buildings. So in the interest of being a good neighbor and a good partner to the existing office commercial facilities, we're going to modify the plan to make sure that we don't do any large plantings that obscure their sign or the visibility to their facility, and as well as take our sign and push it back so it doesn't wash out and or block the visibility to their existing ground monument signs. And with that, I guess I could take any questions that you have, or I could assist the owner with a bit of his presentation.
I don't have any lights up, but Mr. Parker, we'll go to you, and then maybe we'll have questions for the applicant.
Thanks, Fletcher.
Hey, good morning, John Parker, one of the owners of Rapid Wash. And what we'd like to do is improve the area, something like we've done on North Haynes. I think what we've done up there is a vast improvement than what was there before. Before building the wash here in Rapid City on North Haynes, I owned 5 car washes in Colorado. We were much more constricted on the land use down there by neighborhoods than what we are up here. And I'd like to show you how we coexist with the neighborhoods on the washes we build in Colorado, and then go on to address some of your noise concerns on the vacuums. So this is a car wash I did on the north side of Denver, Colorado Express wash right here. And you can see right next to it, we have the housing subdivision that went in there. So in the past, vacuums, if you've gone by the old car washes with the standalone canisters, were very noisy. The new systems where you have a central producer, and you can build that into a structure, the vacuums are very quiet. They're actually at the same noise level as conversation. So here's one example. Might have to put this one sideways. So this is another one in northern Colorado we built in with a Walmart shopping center. Car wash is right here. Similar, we have the subdivision off to the side of us. This is another one in northern Colorado. Car wash is right here, backs up right to the backyards of subdivision. Vacuum area is right next to their backyards, but again, with the new vacuum systems, they produce about 65 decibels where you're standing right there, conversation level. I can show you a video if you'd like of what I've done with the decibel meter standing right next to the vacuums and what the decibel meter is standing by the street if you'd like to see that. The other concerns that staff had was maybe the smell from the water systems. But what we've done up on North Haynes and what we've done in Colorado is the new water recycle system where you run the water into holding tanks, but then you continuously cycle that water so that it doesn't get a stagnant smell through our reclaim system. It goes into a machine that separates the solids out of it, air injects it, and it also injects ozone that takes out any smell in that water system. Older car washes where they just had basically a settling tank and they didn't cycle that water through a machine, and the ozone did tend to start smelling when it got warmer, but we've taken care of that with the new systems.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Any questions for the applicants on this item? Anybody have a motion? Galen?
Sure. I think my questions were addressed in terms of working with the neighbors and make sure to mitigate their concerns. So I'll make a motion to approve this, both the final plan development and the rezone to general commercial per staff stipulations.
If I can, there was an offer from the applicant to relocate the above-ground landscaping and signage that may impede with the sight triangle of the neighboring businesses. Would you like to add a stipulation that they follow through with that as part of their plan?
Yeah, that's kind of part of the deal. I'm not sure how to word that, but yeah, acknowledging the applicant's moving of the sign and landscaping from the, as previously recorded in the notes.
Vicky, sometimes you have the best wording on the
Whatever
spot.
Vicky says is what I want.
I was thinking ahead, so it would be my recommendation that a stipulation be added that says, the proposed LED sign shall be allowed as a monument sign only. In addition, the location of the sign and the landscaping along the south lot line shall be located to minimize visual obstruction to the adjacent office commercial development.
All right. So we have a motion on the floor from Galen with the staff stipulations as written, including the additional one that Vicky just stated. Is there a second to that motion? All right, John seconded that motion. Rachel?
I have a quick question for planning staff regarding the motion.
Yeah.
It's so with that wording, and I know this isn't their intent, but with that wording, could they instead place the sign closer to the residential area, or is it restricted to just the 5th Street abutting property?
Mr. Chair.
Vicky?
So we could state, to answer Rachel's question, you're right. If we want to ensure the sign is located along 5th Street, but relocated to minimize the visual impact to along 5th Street. So we will ensure that that language includes that signage remain along 5th Street, but shifted so that it minimizes the visual impact to the adjacent office commercial development.
Okay, thank you.
Motion maker and second. Does that work for you guys? Mike Kwasny.
That was part of what I was going with what Rachel was saying there. I can appreciate that we're putting it there. I commend the developer of this on how he's willing to work with the neighbors, and I think that's important in any time that we're in a community, that we work as neighbors, and I think that's great that that's happening. So.
All right, any further questions or comments on the motion? Rachel?
Sorry to prolong this. I think I just want to point out that car washes, operated in a different manner would be, in my opinion, wholly inappropriate for this area. But to me, it sounds like this is an owner who has really considered the needs of the neighborhood. They've looked at how loud their vacuums are, mitigated problems with odors. So I just want to point that out and make sure that it's actually, taken into consideration if we look at car washes in the future, which we certainly will, that is a huge difference in how I'm going to vote here. So I just want to point that out.
All right, further questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, I heard 2 no's. Did I catch it right? Okay, motion carries. That was item 8 and 9. We're at the end of our regular agenda. So I'll take the time now, probably should have done it at the start, to welcome Kelly Arguello and Eric Heikes to the commission. Eric's joining as an alternate. Kelly is our 3 Mile representative, so he's a voting member. And with the changes, Vince is now a full voting member, so we got him every time now. And Eric's moved up to alternate number 1. We also have 3 Erics on the commission right now, but only one spells his name right. Vince?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I just want to let Vicki and Fletcher know that spending 20 years in the Navy, I often felt like a transient. So I think Vicki was talking to me.
Any staff items or discussion items today? Okay. Any other planning commission items? All right, Rachel.
Okay, sorry, this is kind of silly, but my address needs to be updated. I don't know if maybe I forgot to get you my new address. We moved in March, so you have my ward correct, but just not the address.
All right, I look for a motion to adjourn. All right, John made the motion, Rachel seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?